Okay, good afternoon all. Welcome to DC Velocity Last Mile Theater. I'm Emmanuel Langlois. I'm the VP Sales at Generix Group. And with me, I have our good friend Jean-Martin Roux, CEO of Onomatic. And today's topic, we'll talk about interoperability, the challenge of a next generation warehouse. And I will start, and Jean-Martin will continue with some good stuff. And we'll try to leave 5-10 minutes, maybe at the end, for questions.
Yeah.
We have 45 minutes, so we'll try to wrap this up in 45 minutes, including the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you should be seeing is actually learning objectives. I can see it fine over here, but basically, as Emmanuel mentioned, we'll do a quick overview of the market trends. We'll walk into how to think about warehouse management system and multi-agent orchestration platforms and their role in an automated warehouse, and then just look at technology trends and how we can use some of the technology to build workflow within automated facilities and trying to make them interoperable. So I'll let you continue there.
So I love this slide. Really means a lot in terms of innovation. Things are changing. I mean, you guys are here at MODEX. I mean, clearly when you look around, lots of things are changing. The context of the supply chain is changing. Customer expectation, customer regulation, the type of technology that is available, all kind of things that drives a lot of change. So I love that quote because clearly when we look at the WMS market and what we were expecting from WMS, there will be a lot of changes, okay? And is it going to happen by 2026? Doesn't matter. It could be 2027, 2028, but it is happening, okay? There will be more evolution in the next few years than the last 25 years. Now, when you look at different factors that drive those change, labor is definitely a good driving factor in terms of change, because we used to drive a lot of projects about saving on cost on labor. Now we're justifying project on labor availability. Am I going to have enough people to work in my warehouse in 5 years on night shift? Okay? And clearly this labor is driving risk of not having enough people or the right skills people to do the job. And that's one of the reasons in terms of how can we do things differently. Clearly, the innovation with the automation is taking a lot of momentum right now. So some interesting stats, again, from Gartner. Clearly, when you look at different intralogistic robots, I remember coming to MODEX a few years ago, there were 1 or 2 booths with robots. Today, you walk around, it's all about robots, okay? It's all about automation. It's all about optimizing with better software, better technology. So human is not moving, it's not disappearing from the warehouse, but clearly the role of the human will be changing, and the robots will definitely play another role, okay? Example, the traveling time, okay? So if you're a picker, the reach is still hard to do from a robot point of view, but human do the reach, and the robot is right there, and the robot do the traveling, okay? So all this, I mean, it's happening, a lot of changes. But one thing that is really clearly challenging also is the fact that with all this new technology, being software or being automation equipment, next slide, clearly there's things changing in many different areas. We've talked about labor. We've talked about automation changing. Also, definitely a lot of change also in the leadership, having better information, more information. How do we use our information? And now, definitely, there's tools that allow us to better usage, better understanding, and consuming that information to make us more intelligent in terms of productivity, planning, etc. So a lot of things. So when you look at this, there's new acronym happening. I mean, Gartners love acronyms. Warehouse operation management. But then when you look at the different pieces, the next slide, you'll see that around this new concept of warehouse operation management, I mean, the WMS is still there, okay? So clearly, WMS has a role to play in that new way of doing things, in that new automation era. But there's other pieces now that are becoming very, very important to work with the WMS. Warehouse labor. I said human is not disappearing from the warehouse. How do we manage our workforce, okay? Clearly, you need to attract people, you need to retain people, so there's new LMS out there. They are more around engagement. Some people say gamification, teamwork, performance-based pay, giving more like real-time feedback to the users, thumbs up, thumbs down, you're too late, you're fast, you're not fast, all kind of tools. Warehouse planning and analytics, we talk about better leadership, better user information. There's all kind of analytics systems now that are connected to WMS. Warehouse control system, WCS, they've been around for a while, but clearly with this new automation wave, their role is changing. Same thing with warehouse execution system. Yes, WES, WCS, WMS used to exist. They were pretty much kind of silos a little bit. They were integrated together, but with all this new technology, innovation, automation, there's a need now to have a more integrated platform, and we'll talk about this. We call it the MAO, multi-agent orchestration platform, very key now in order to leverage all this new automation connected to WMS. So,
yeah,
I'll leave the stage to Jean-Martin.
Yeah, awesome. So thank you, Emmanuel, to give a quick overview of what leads to the emergence of these new platforms and why they're relevant when you're considering automation into your intralogistics operation. So the first thing to think about is, what are we assigning in platforms like this? Like, what's the role of such a platform in your operation? And you really need to think about 5 key pillars of these platforms. One is the management pillar. That's all of the features you expect out of your warehouse management tool, right? Thinking about inventory in a specific location and then all of the movements that need to occur to keep inventory where it needs to be. However, you then have integration challenges, orchestration challenges, execution challenges, and then control challenges as well. And these are all the functional pillars of a multi-agent orchestration tool. So what does that mean? If you're familiar with traditional automation, this is just a SCADA-inspired pyramid, but applied to intralogistics operation. So these are the types of interaction and role that, at a macroscopic level, you should think of assigning to these different platforms. So the ERP remains at the top of the pyramid, which is basically where demand is going to originate from, right? So you're going to get some kind of purchase order or sales order that's going to come in and then drive that demand. It's then going to flow into the warehouse management system, and to the left you can see the different interactions, or at least types of documents that move from a layer of the pyramid to the other. The warehouse management really is there to create the warehouse documents, so pick tasks, replenishment tasks, that kind of activity, and then also maintain the inventory information, so that bin level inventory. When you fall into the multi-agent orchestration, you're going to merge material flow systems, warehouse execution, and warehouse control. And the material flow there is really about the task grouping and the dispatching logic that you're going to find in most of these systems, right? So this is about understanding what pieces or what steps should your material flow through, and what are the types of equipment or human interaction that need to happen throughout. So that's what you should expect in terms of logic applied to this layer. There's a bunch of AI capabilities that will go in there, right? Understanding and predicting how to use the equipment along the way. The execution layer is basically what you're going to find in this platform is usually going to be your user interface. How are you going to interact with the robotics that's within a workflow? So in that layer there, we're really thinking about what kind of UI is being used to interact with the equipment. And then the control layer, it really is about how do you drive the equipment? What kind of commands are required to get a robot or a conveyor or a pick arm to do its job. So if you look at the different tasks being exchanged, these are the kind of components you need to think about, and the emergence of multi-agent orchestration really embodies really the 4 layers below the ERP there in the system. And if you dig a little deeper into it, this is the kind of platform, we did a project with one of our robotics partner, but then if you dig into one of these layers, which in this case would be the control layer, you're going to find that there's actually more acronyms that you're going to stumble upon. And this is also a key component as you're trying to understand how that interoperability theme comes up, is how does these platforms work together, and what should you expect from an automation vendor to be made available to you? And how does that come together with all of the different tools in your platform? So if you look at this here, I took an example from a project Emmanuel and I worked on where we use Generix's solo chain warehouse management system. And then we get pick tasks from that system sent to the material flow and warehouse control layers that are into our Onomatic platform. Over there, there is then a robotics provider that has a robotics management system and then a fleet management system as well into that control layer. And this is something you should expect all of your robotics vendor to bring to the table. And what are the kind of decisions that are in there? Right? So if you think about that MFS and WCS, it really is about understanding how to distribute that demand that comes from the WMS, which robot should be getting which task, and then deciding at which frequency should these tasks be dispatched. But then in the robot management layer and the fleet management layer, you've got other decisions that the robotics the robotics provider need to make. The RMS, some multi-agent orchestration platform will have, so they'll know how to page a robot, they'll know how to do the user interaction, we talked about the execution layer, they'll also know how to balance the traffic, right? Not all robotics providers are created equal, and when you're considering automation, this is something you should keep in mind. Do I have this piece of logic into all of my ecosystem of solutions? And then the last piece, which you should always expect from a robotics provider, is the fleet management. And really these are really what ends up happening at the robot level, really obstacle avoidance, obstacle recognition, path recognition. So that is usually proprietary to the robot manufacturer, but and therefore, you're not seeking that from an independent vendor. This should always be the manufacturer's platform. So that's just a key component to understand in just a robotics, an AMR scenario. What are the interoperable platform that you need to that you'll need to work with? So, with that in mind, how do you think about a multi-agent workflow, and what is that about? So, I'll show you how that is applicable, but the first concept is to think about all of the boxes that you have in front of you are workflow steps. Each of these steps should be thought of as a component that's going to have an execution mode, that's going to have a specific equipment, and then the equipment is going to have a or multiple devices to connect to. So what I drew here is just an example of batch picking scenario that would have a process of consolidation at the end. So you're combining picks of multiple orders into one reach. So let's say you have 100 orders that need 2 items, and then you're going to pick 100 into different totes, but you're not segregating the orders just yet. So you've batch picked, you've done 2 reach of 100, but then you're going to do a consolidation step into a put wall in this scenario, where you're going to drop the items individually through a consolidation process. So you're going to see in this workflow, there's 5 steps, and we're going to need to think about, all right, if I want to work through optimizing this workflow into my multi-agent platform, I better know how is the conveyor going to work, and how is the conveyor executed, and what kind of capacity does it have at the very beginning of the work, so that I send the right commands to the robotics that are going to execute the pick to avoid bottlenecks around the way. So that's really what you need to keep in mind is when you're considering automation, think about your workflows first so that you get the most of all devices along the way. And by doing that, you're going to be able to combine all of this into one multi-agent orchestration platform that's going to make sure that you get the most of all of your investments. So what does that look like? Yeah, a little video that's quickly going to show you that in application. So this is an example of a facility that Emmanuel and I worked on. So why workflows matter. So I was just making this point, but what you're going to see here is this batch picking actually happening on the bots. So you have 4 totes that then will be conveyed into the conveyor to a put wall, which will then push things through a packing station. So the first step is to make sure that you're properly integrated into your ERP or WMS platform to get your demand along the way. So that's a very straightforward component. Then you're going to execute the batch pick. So you've got, once again, on each of these totes, specific components, items that are being batched together for picking execution. Then that's what the multi-agent orchestration platform is thinking about, is what work should I be sending to the bot, what order should I be combining, so that once all of the picking is indeed executed, how is it going to be routed on the conveyor to the put walls? So over here, the totes that are completely picked are the ones that make the most sense to be putting on the conveyor to then use to the put wall. So then what we're going to see here is that the third step, as we were describing, is actually sorting these items to different put walls through the conveyor. But since the multi-agent orchestration platform understands how to control the conveyor, how busy the conveyor is, what kind of rate of speed is available on the conveyor, it knows which tote it needs to send to which wall, and then has the ability to do this instruction. So we're still remaining in our MAO platform, and we're performing here the batch pick in a step, which is, we're performing the consolidation in a step that now is controlled by the multi-agent orchestration. It has its own user interface and has the ability to not only instruct the user what should be done, but also send the commands to the different put lights in this scenario. So really that's how you need to think about it, is this whole workflow here has used 3 distinct type of equipment while being under the same multi-agent orchestration platform for execution, control, integration, and execution. So think that gives you a big idea. So that's one of our flagship install. It's fast, so there's a bunch of different other automation that are being controlled over there. But the key component here is to think about your workflows first and to make sure that that's the component that you prioritized when you're considering automation and building multi-pieces workflow. Okay, so that is very interesting and has the ability to give you a lot of benefits, operational benefits, but then how should you be thinking about automation? Right? So what we're trying to do in this presentation as well is to give you a few pointers as to what is a simple piece of automation, what is a piece of automation that requires a lot of investment, and really just to help you make these automation decisions. So the graph that we have here, the spider chart, is about this AMR plus conveyor plus put wall consolidation. But then I'll show you in the next section how to think about these pieces through how much intelligence needs to be deployed for some pieces of equipment, what kind of CapEx is required, what kind of physical complications they impose, the degree of integration, the time to implement, and how mature the platforms are. So what the whole process that you saw is pretty much as advanced as it gets in terms of all components, but the maturity of the solution, in terms of bringing all 3 or all 4 components together. Okay, so the first thing we need to think about in terms of interoperability then is who owns what, and where are these documents assigned? To which platforms are they assigned? So I'm not going to run through each and every one of these components, but I just want to remind you to be or to pay attention to these components when you're considering such projects. So the first thing is, if you think about a sales order, right, that demand. We were talking about the top of the pyramid. The ERP is always going to be the core component within your business where all your demand should be consolidated. You're going to have different demand sources. You're going to be plugged into different marketplaces, but you should have a centralized portion that is going to help you to understand your material requirements, what kind of cash you're going to need, and what kind of cash you're going to get, right? So these are key components to keep in mind. You then have the warehouse management system, who, in the scenario we were talking about, will be in charge of creating the pick task. So once again, the WMS's role is to know and identify where the inventory sits and how to send a command to get it out of that specific location, right? So the WMS remains, it's still in charge of creating replenishments, still in charge of creating putaways, but then handing off the execution of pick tasks to most multi-agent orchestration platforms. Then you can think about just different other portions, like the automation execution then sits on that WES, WCS, MFS, or MAO platform. Makes sense so far? All right, so next thing, now that we understand the flow of the information, there's the other piece that you need to think about when deploying automation, which is always going to be who owns the master data. So we talked about the transaction, but then, all right, well, if I have this multi-agent orchestration tool, where is it going to get the locations from, right? Or if an AMR or a bot exists, well, who defines that that's bot number 1, and that's bot number 2. Like, where does that master data sit? So that's also, I'm not going to go through each and every one of them, but if you think about who gets to own some key pieces of information, the AMR bot itself has the, usually it's going to sit in the WCS or the MFS to know that the robot exists. And the bin layouts, once again, for the inventory level, that sits at the WMS layer. A conveyor segment and the diverters, that's part of the warehouse control. So all of that information then sits on the MAO platform, and that's where you can segregate that piece of information. So we'll make that slide available, but you'll be able to think about interoperability as far as who owns not only the transactional information, but the master data as well. Okay, good. So in terms of interoperability and thinking about all of the pieces of software that need to come together to make an automated intralogistics operation happen, that's a quick overview of these pieces that you need to have awareness of. Now, how to think about the pieces of automation on the market, and how can you use this information to build your own workflows. So the first thing I want to talk about here, and Emmanuel has touched base on this, so I'm not going to spend too much time, but we're going to think about the first thing, the first component that influences the decision-making in automation is going to be how does it interact your laborers, right? So are you going to save money? Are you going to be able to replace people? And, at what cost? So then, impact on space, right? So that's another huge piece of information that you need to think about. And you're going to have just, well, if you want to have an operation in a densely populated area or close to a main city, well, you might have a high cost of real estate, or you're going to have, then productivity by square foot is going to be a key factor in your decision-making process. And then you might have other just market components that are going to influence you to consider automation, such as how much of that space is available, or you may be considering a brownfield building. You want to integrate automation or add automation into an existing building. So what kind of structure or shape of the building do you have? You can also have, or one other big piece in there is floor considerations, right? Based on the quality of your flooring, you're going to be able to consider different pieces of automation that may need, specific specific flooring material or specific reflective factors about the floor, and just how strong it is in terms of weight capacity as well. So all sorts of things in your space, in your building, that can influence your automation decision. And then just additional factors, you may get incentives out of it. It might just be also a huge marketing benefit to your operation. If you're a 3PL and you want to make sure you can show you're at the forefront of the market, you may want to use that automated facility to gain market shares. So then, which step of your operation should you be thinking to introduce automation into, right? So, well, that's one of my favorite slides because it really lays out what are the steps, in an intralogistics material flow, and where are you spending dollars to run your operation, right? So we've done multiple analysis through consulting partners, and really what they come up with is the receiving operation or the receiving step is about 10% of your overall operating costs. 15% of it is going to be in put away and replenishment combined. And then picking, consolidation, and packing is 60% of your cost, right? Operating cost. So if you walk around these, 3 floors now at MODEX this year, you're going to see a lot of people are offering solution into the picking, the consolidation, and the packing, right? And it's no surprise because it's really about building, picking, and consolidation workflows where you're going to see the people save the most money. And then, shipping is another 15%. So really, why I say that is we're focused on showing you a picking and packing process today, really because that's where you end up, usually as an operator, spending the most money. But it's just fun to have that in mind when you're thinking, well, I have this great, unloading robot, like floor stack container unloading robot. I think that makes sense to me, but keep in mind of where your labor or operating costs are going first when you're considering automation. All right, so next thing here is, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of how I would rank pieces of automation and how complicated or how complex these solutions are on the market. And I came up with this extremely scientific grading system. So the simple stuff is about crawling. I'm actually expecting my first kid in July, so I'll have a lot of that going on. Then there's sort and sequence, and then pick and put in the end. Sorry, so crawl, walk, run, and then, in moving, sorting, and pick and put in the end. So that's how we're gonna rank the operation. So basically, the last 2 components that influence that is what type of handling unit are you working with, right? So are you working with pallets or eaches? I just had someone visit our booth, and they mentioned they had garbage bins, smart garbage bins that they want to haul around. Well, yeah, that's a huge consideration if as opposed to like little clickers or little pens that you're moving around. And then, just your order profiles have a huge impact on how you select that automation too. Okay, and the last thing is this chart I was talking about. I'll leave you guys with that as well so you can take it away. But these things are how we think about the solutions, is how mature are they, how much intelligence is required, CapEx, difficulty, implementation, and so forth. All right, so what would be considered a crawl pace automation? So your entry into automation here while you're building your workflows. So an example of storage solutions, you'll have the pallet shuttles, pallet level ASRSs, or even some carousels that can store individual units. Keep in mind, there are other solutions that do that, but we're now focused on what are the simple or the entry-level pieces of automation. And then for material handling, the simpler components are going to be the self-guided vehicles, so not AMR, but self-guided vehicles, and then conveyors. Conveyors have been around for a long time, so have, wire vehicles around. How do we think about those? So if we think about the pallet shuttles, usually these, they're pretty mature. They're not, there's a lot of innovation still coming in there, but the traditional ones, have been out there, and you've got a bunch of really robust partners on the show floor here this week. They're usually quite expensive in terms of required capital. The thing is, they're bulky, they handle full pallets usually, right? And they require a lot of energy as well. But they're pretty mature, and where you're gonna see them being used is when you need a high density of the same SKUs, right? When you have pallet quantities of the same item that you're trying to cram into a building, that's where these become relevant. You can think then of carousels. Similarly, mature solution, not necessarily the smartest out there now that you have a bunch of cube storage solutions that we're going to quickly touch base on later in the presentation, but that's also a crawl level piece of automation. What are those? Then these make sense when quite the opposite of the pallet shuttle, we have a high SKU count with lower quantities that you're trying to store, right? So that's a good use case for that. And then unit level ASRSs, well, these are usually purpose-built buildings with up to like 80 feet tall ceilings, and that may even serve as a complete structure of a building. I did a project with a company called New Cold. They have their own technology, and they usually work in frozen layouts like this, like shrimps off boats on both coasts. Like in Seattle, they have a facility like this just for Highliner products, and it's quite impressive what they do. So in there's a lot of intelligence, it's quite expensive, and that's usually that density of small SKU counts, once again, but like really, really, really high numbers of these SKUs. Okay, so that's crawl, and then just the self-guided vehicles and the conveyors. Well, these are mostly for static defined movements, right, in both cases, and these are pretty self-explanatory as well. For time management, I'm gonna just move to the next slides as well. Okay, so then we're in this middle layer of what I would consider walking. So, walking is pretty good. That's what most people are doing anyway. We're not all ready for the Olympics yet. So walking shouldn't be perceived as negative, but just as a good advance where you should be thinking your operation is in 2024. So we have shuttle and dense cube storage solutions, AMRs, A-frames for sequencing of the operations. And then sortation, well, you have like conveyor systems or even like OPEX's SureSort, for instance, but rapid diversion systems, if we're not going to use the brand name there. So I have to think about those. I'll go quickly into that. So the AMR there, one point I just want to make here is you'll notice that I've put the CapEx fairly low when it comes to AMRs. And the main reason is when you're building your workflows, these are quite interesting because most of them are now in a robot as a service model. So the initial capital to consider solutions like this is usually pretty low, right? Because you're going to end up coming up with a subscription plan for your robots. However, they require a lot of intelligence, and to get the most out of them, there's a high level of software integration. Most vendors are going to come with their own platform, but if you're thinking of a complete end-to-end workflow, there's additional integrations you should be thinking of. Very rarely will only one AMR solution take care of all your storage and handling scenarios. I have yet to see a facility that runs only on AMRs and that wouldn't be wishing they had something else to take care of other pieces of the workflow. All right, so that's just why CapEx is low on this. A-frame, mature solution, quick sortation, very popular in retail and pharmaceutical when you have small items that you're going to quickly sort into patient orders. And then dense cubic systems. These are very, very cool. This is one of them is the AutoStore, but there's a bunch of different vendors out here today or this week. And the best use case as well. These components are likely the most expensive to deploy. However, there's a lot of benefits you're going to get from them, and their best use case is going to be for each picking, outbound buffering, right? If you're trying to do a single shipments, and you want to have really dense storage of slow-moving SKUs, that's really, really, really a good application for those. And then most of them are also going to be scalable, right? They do take a lot of capital and a lot of space. However, they are likely easy to expand compared to other platforms such as conveyors, for instance. Okay, then in the sortation, same thing. The Sure sorts, well, these are also really good for for batch pick sortation. Pretty much like a put wall, but an automated put wall there. So e-commerce orders that have a high volume of similar SKUs being shipped. And then in conveyor sortation, well, you can think of, just parcel distribution for that. And parcel chutes that are still, cannot be served better than by traditional conveyor sortation. And then the last piece what I would consider running is the use of dock unloaders, picking robot arms, all of these visualization tools that are available, and then a few drone applications that you'll notice around here. And these would be part, from my perspective, of more advanced workflow. These solutions are the ones that are emerging, I would say, or have been around for less than 5 years on the market. So where those are used, briefly, dock unloaders, really, these are used to help you unload a floor stack sea container. Really, that's the most convenient way to use those. They're not the most complex components to deploy. The one thing to think about, however, are a bunch of physical considerations of how high your dock doors are, how long you can keep a container at your dock doors, such things to consider. Robot arms, you can get a lot of cool picking solutions combined with conveyors, and once again, interoperable components. And then the drones, mostly dark warehouse inventory count. I find those to be actually pretty cool, where you can just send the bots out there to use infrared or even camera visual recognitions to count stock, and then update warehouse management system through it. So you can make that part of a workflow at the very beginning prior to launching picking operation to make sure you've got proper stock levels. So why I've shared all of that is so you guys can think about, and if you're considering automation, which mostly everybody now is at least curious about it, that you put your workflow first and think about where will it fit in your operation, where is that cost of operation savings going to come from, and then how to think about the different pieces of automation there. All right, so we'll just take the last 7 minutes to talk a little bit more about who Generix and Onomatic is, and I'll let Emmanuel start.
Okay, thank you, GM. So very quickly, Generix Group, we are a solution software company specialized in supply chain execution. Warehouse management system is one of our core product. Very nice platform. This is, ranking coming from the Gartner report, the Magic Quadrant, what we call a CC report, Critical Capability Report, where they rank the best solution in the world for WMS. So for usability, ease of use, ease of train, rank number 2. Very key, adaptability, configurability, we rank number 2, second best in the world. We all know today that agility, how fast can you adapt your system, how fast can you respond to new demands, new requirements, and adapt your system. That is something that people really look for today. And also implementation tool. When you have a very flexible, highly configurable system, you need also the tool to make sure you do things under control, okay? Because with configuration tool, you can create chaos very quickly if you don't have the discipline to make sure that you document everything, you test everything, you train people on the correct things. So all this documentation, training, testing is all done on a very nice implementation platform. It's a web collaboration platform, very key to how we successfully deploy our solution. And also, we're number 1 for everything related to a warehouse supporting manufacturing operation or value-added services, where we kind of connect the manufacturing floor with the warehouse operation. Next slide. So those are examples of the tool. When I say ease of use, very graphical. Next slide. We use a lot of 2D model. A lot of information in WMS is related to something that happened somewhere. So a lot of information is displayed, easy to consume with 2D model, easy to for the user to look at the information and make sure that they operate in a very efficient way.
All right, thanks, Emmanuel. And on our end, from Onomatic, we're part of the Generix Group, which is a larger consultancy. We've got our American operation, our headquarters are in Los Angeles and Atlanta. We've got offices in Montreal and Toronto as well. And then we serve the Asia market out of Seoul, South Korea, Europe out of London, and we've got a new operation out of Mexico City as well for Latin America. And then what we're about is really deploying multi-agent orchestration with very modern technology that is cloud-based, but we've come up with a very advanced edge computing platform where we have the ability to keep the real-time responsiveness that conveyor systems and robotic solution require through hybrid hosting, which allows us to keep some components on premise to have real-time calls while keeping all of the logic on the cloud. So that's who we are and what we're about. So we're 3.5 minutes away from 45 minutes. You did very well, Emmanuel. Thank you for keeping me in check.
I mean, we're going to stay here after the presentation, so you're welcome to walk in front. And any question that...
Well, maybe not.
Good.
It's okay. Maybe it means we're really clear or really boring. I hope it's the former and not the latter.
Now, by the way, we're here in the C hall at the end where all the software warehouse management system are. You'll see us, big sign. So also we're here until Thursday.
C4360.
Yeah. We're both co-located. So if you come to see Onomatic, we're right beside and vice versa.
Yeah.
We're here until Thursday, 1 p.m. So you're welcome to come, see demos, talk to us.
Yeah,
we'll be happy to meet you guys.
Yeah, we've got a few AMRs and conveyor system and light controls that were on display. So we'll feel free to come talk to us about your workflows.
Thanks
you
all.
Attending.
Enjoy MODEX. Enjoy Atlanta.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.